Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater. I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum. And I want to welcome you all to tonight's talk with artist Akinsanya Kambon. Akinsanya Kambon's work is part of the Hammer's 2023 biennial Made in LA, which is currently on view in our galleries. Kambon was born and raised in Sacramento, California, and he was drafted and sent to fight in the Vietnam War in 1966. After 2 years in Vietnam, he returned to California and joined the Sacramento chapter of the Black Panther Party. Kambon found that the ideology of Black power and its belief in the value of culture as a necessary tool in political and social liberation were closely aligned with his beliefs, and he became the lieutenant of culture for the group. Like many of the other artists represented in the Made in LA biennial, Kambon creates objects that are vehicles for histories that have often been suppressed by forces of colonization and subjugation. He's worked in clay for almost 40 years, creating sculptures in the form of vessels, figures, and wall plaques. These ceramics are entry points into the stories of the Black diaspora, including African histories and mythologies, as well as stories of violence and revolution from around the world. Kambon was a professor of ceramics for 26 years at Cal State Long Beach and received commendations and awards from the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts, the City of Long Beach, and the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Cultures. And his work is in the collections of the Hammer Museum, MoMA, the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento, and the Rennie Museum in Vancouver. His art has been shown in solo exhibitions at the Jack Shaman Gallery in New York, the Crocker and the Pan-African Art Gallery and Studio in Long Beach, and he was featured in recent group exhibitions at the Oakland Museum of California and the Joyce Gordon Gallery in Oakland. So tonight, Akinsanya Kambon will be interviewed by renowned art historian Dr. Bridget Cooks. Dr. Cooks is a professor of art history and African American studies at UC Irvine. Her research focuses on African American artists, Black visual culture, and museum criticism. She's the author of the book Exhibiting Blackness, African Americans and the American Art Museum. Her writing can also be found in dozens of art exhibition catalogs and academic publications such as Afterimage, American Studies, Aperture, and American Quarterly. She has curated several exhibitions, including Grafton Tyler Brown Exploring California at the Pasadena Museum of California Art, Ernie Barnes, a retrospective at the California African American Museum, The Black Index, which originated at the UC Irvine Contemporary Arts Center and traveled to Palo Alto, Texas, and New York, Dissolve at the UC Irvine Langston Institute and Museum of California Art, and Lava Thomas Homecoming at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts and the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art. Prior to her appointment at UC Irvine, Dr. Cooks taught at Santa Clara University in the Department of Art and Art History and the Program of Ethnic Studies. She also served as a museum educator for the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. So now we're going to hear a conversation between the two of them, and then they'll take some audience questions. And then afterwards, we'll have some light refreshments out in the theater lobby, and we can all talk a little bit more out there. So now, without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Akinsanya Kambon and Bridget Cooks.
All right, this is wonderful. So thanks everybody for being here. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I met Professor Kambon years ago and am thrilled to see him get the attention and the platform that's way overdue for the work that he's been making. So congratulations to you.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So I just wanted to start with some slides just to make sure everyone knows which work is Professor Kambon's. Not everybody, I think, has had a chance to walk through the exhibition. So there's a number of sculptural works, 4 sculptures, and then several relief sculptures that hang on the wall. So this is one of them, Tower of Power, showing you 2 different angles.
Yeah, Tower of Power basically deals with anti-lynching movement, and mostly men were getting lynched, but it was women that were in the forefront of the anti-lynching movement, because Ida B. Wells was one of the ones that we know in that particular movement, but the women were losing husbands, sons, and things of that nature. That's why the women were so powerful in the forefront.
Okay, let me show one more. There we go. This is just one of the other examples.
And this basically speaks to spirituality and things that people believe in. They have had different things that have been gods, from ancient Kemet, the eye, the scarab. They believed that the scarab pushed the sun across the sky that brought life. And then on the other side, you see Sabat. Sabat is the crocodile god that they say was the god of the underworld or darkness.
Okay. So already, I think people are getting a sense of some of the thematic interests in your work. You know, you're very much, we've talked about this, you're a naturally gifted storyteller and you love history. And those are some of the things that people can find and learn from in your work. So I wanted to just start by letting people know you're from Sacramento, okay?
Born there.
Born there. You were made in California, and this work was made in LA, okay? And I want to go to some work that some people know you for and other people need to know you for.
Okay.
This is the Black Panther coloring book. And there are different theories about this document online, and I'd love if you would just tell us the actual story of how it came about.
Okay, well, one of the things, I was in the Marine Corps. I was drafted in '66. And while I was in Vietnam, one of the things was I didn't know how to read. I was illiterate. And when in Vietnam, a lot of the older guys figured out that there were many of us who couldn't read. So what they were doing is they were trying to school us every Wednesday at these soul sessions, where we get a newspaper and they go through the newspaper reading things that we should know. And they start putting us down with the history of slavery and all the stuff that they were telling me. I was really absorbing it because I'd never heard that slaves revolted. The only thing I'd ever heard is that the slaves picked cotton, they was on the plantation singing and dancing. But I never heard anything about a slave revolt. And when I started learning this, it's kind of made me feel proud that we were slaves and we just picked cotton. But then when I found out about these rebellions, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, when I found out about them, it lifted my spirits. It made me feel good because, you know, if you're just a slave and you just accept it without fighting back, and you look at all the things that they did, all the atrocities that were committed against slaves, you feel like, well, damn, how come they didn't fight back? So when you read about the ones, you hear about the ones that did fight back that you never heard about, you realize that there are a lot of other people probably in the same situation I was in terms of a grown man who doesn't know that slaves rebelled against that system that was so vicious. So I decided that since I was an artist, I started keeping all these stories about Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser in my mind, and I did these drawings that were supposed to be a history book. But at the time, I was a lieutenant of culture of the Sacramento chapter of the Black Panther Party. So when I took the book, as I was working on just the sketches to Oakland, Bobby Seale saw it and he was all excited. So he said, okay, well, we're going to print these up. And I said, but I'm not finished with it yet. Oh, no, it's finished enough. It's finished enough. So they started calling it the Black Panther coloring book.
But it wasn't intended to be a coloring book.
It was supposed to be a history book for people that were adults that are illiterate like I was, trying to give them that history so that they could see the history and relate to it, because I felt that a lot of other people in this country don't have the true history. And when you find out the true history, you can accept everything else. But when they bring it on you all of a sudden, like they did Roots, it can cause a shock to people.
Now, would you tell everyone how old you were when you were drafted into the Marines?
19.
Okay.
19.
And you had gone through public school in Sacramento and hadn't learned anything about Black history.
No, I had not.
And you learned about it in Vietnam.
I did. The only thing I learned in Black history was that we were slaves. I think it was about a paragraph that we picked cotton and that and that.
Okay.
No revolts, nothing about that.
So you made this book as a history book. It became a coloring book. And then if you would tell the rest of the story, just because I would love for the true story to come out, because there's so many things online.
Well, once the book was out, they had sent them to all the different chapters in the country, and they started selling them for 25 cents a book. And 2 weeks after the book came out, 2 weeks later, it made headlines in all the newspapers all across the country. They call it the racist coloring book put out by the Black Panther Party. The FBI and COINTELPRO got a hold of the book, and they put out the lies that we were forcing the kids to learn how to kill pigs and study the coloring book before we fed them breakfast. That was a lie. But, it was printed, and so people believed it. But it wasn't true.
Okay.
And so once the coloring book started making headlines like that, the Panther Party looked at it like it was going to interfere with the donations, because a lot of white people were supporting our breakfast program. That was one of the socialist programs that we started that we got a lot of support from. And they were afraid that white people would feel like the book was a racist book and they wouldn't donate anything to the breakfast program. So they threw me under the bus. And under the bus, I said, yeah, okay. So we had a meeting and I talked about, well, okay, I'll have a exhibit, the first art exhibit I had. I came out and I said, well, the party said they didn't approve of the book. I did it on my own. And, I fell on my sword. So
Now, when was this first exhibit? In 60, 69 or 70?
69, it was at the Oak Park School of Afro-American Thought in Sacramento in 1969. I had a flyer for that exhibit. I don't know where it is now, but I probably still have it somewhere.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for telling us that story.
Okay.
And so I have a number of examples of your paintings. And these paintings that I'm showing at this point have 2 dates on them, from 1968, and some of them are 1970, and then 2016. So could you just talk about this project?
Well, the paintings, I did those paintings from the actual 23-page coloring book. I took the drawings and I put them on canvas and I painted them on 16 by 20 sheets of canvas. And I had finished the book by then. I stopped working on it after the Panther Party came out and denounced it. I just kind of put it away. I didn't work on it anymore until 2015, 16. That's when I started doing the paintings. And I figured that I might as well go ahead and finish what I started, and I did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones I'm showing now are the same compositions, but in painted form.
They're painted, and they also are enhanced a little bit. There's a little bit more in them. If you ever get a hold to the book that the Panther started selling, you can pretty much see the difference. You'll see that this has been enhanced. There's a lot of things in it that weren't in the first one.
Okay.
And actually what it was is a history book. It showed about slavery, and it showed that they captured Africans and took them to different places to be slave labor to build the economy of Europe and America, France, Britain, and the United States of America.
Professor, would you talk a bit about the pig? Because the pig shows up as different characters. Sometimes it's the police. In this case, it's not.
Pigs are people that oppress other people. Pigs are usually part of the ruling class. They're the ones who own and control the means of production. They're the ones who owned all the slaves. And the law enforcement pigs are the ones that enforce the will of the pigs of the power structure. They're the ones, and I've got different pigs, and I have pigs of all colors, but nobody seemed to recognize that in the beginning.
Okay.
Nobody seemed to know that.
Would you talk a bit about the subject matter of this work?
This is talks about the separation of the families. This is where they would take Africans, a mother and a father, or a husband and wife. They would sell them off to different plantations, and they would parcel out the children to other plantations
Okay.
to keep the family divided. And they realized that one of the strongest things that Africans had was the family. And when they divided the family and dehumanized the man and raped the women and sold them to different places, it just tore the family up. This deals with the slave revolts, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser. And this is the part of the history that I never knew. I learned about this while I was in Vietnam. I didn't know that slaves revolted. I didn't know that they had slave rebellions. That's why I felt so bad about being an African and going through slavery, and nobody ever fought against it. Once I learned this, it made me feel kind of proud. I could stick my chest out and be glad.
Okay.
This was the exploitation of the African community, whereas the person who owns and runs the stores in the inner cities, at night when the sun goes down, he takes that basket full of money out to the part of town where he lives and builds that part of town up, and the ghetto becomes a slum very, very fast.
So some of the compositions reflect African American history at large. Some of them reflect more personal stories, things that you've experienced in your life.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This was a young panther. Pig pulled a gun on the little girl. And this is one of those black pigs. If you look at him, you can tell. See his colors? Now, while it was a coloring book, the pigs didn't have a color, but you could color them any color. That's why they called it a coloring book, I guess. I don't know.
You can make that decision yourself. And then later with the paintings, you put in the color.
Now, this is one of my own stories. I was arrested in 1970 for a murder. A police officer was killed, and they said I did it. I had something to do with it. When I was arrested, they tried to get me to sign a document. This is kind of out of order, but let me see the next one.
Okay.
But when they would take me down the hall, they would ask me, you have to use the bathroom? I had been in a little closet for like 7 hours. By then, I had to go to the bathroom. So one officer came and wanted to take me to the bathroom. Another one of them was threatening to castrate me, and I wouldn't go with him. So I waited about 3-4 more hours, and another one came, and he took me to the bathroom. And when the other one came in, the one talking about castrate me, this one chained me to the radiator pipe and had me standing there. And then he took this other guy out. And then about 10 minutes later, the other guy comes in with a straight razor, and he charged me and pulled my pants down and took the razor out. And I was scared. I was scared. And then the other one came in and grabbed him. They started wrestling around on the floor, and he called for backup, and they jumped on the other guy and took him out. And I was standing there with my pants around my ankles, and I was scared.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that, because that's a traumatic situation. And these 3 paintings are about that.
About that experience. Then they took me to the office after that experience, and they told me, you have the right to remain silent. And I guess they knew I couldn't read. So they said, this thing that I'm signing is saying that they advised me of my right to remain silent. So I looked at the paper, and I saw down there, it was a word, WAIVER, right where you sign it. And I looked at it, and it just didn't seem right. And I remembered the first aid in the Panther Party. Legal first aid is if you get arrested, don't sign nothing and don't say nothing. Just give them your name and address. So I dropped the pen on the paper, and I said, my name is Mark Anthony Tiemann. I live at 3608 6th Avenue. And, man, they jumped on me and beat the hell out of me. threw me to the floor, kicked all my teeth out, and then they took me and threw me in a cell.
Okay, and how long were you incarcerated?
I was locked up for a year fighting that murder case,
And then you were acquitted.
and I was acquitted.
So, would you? I mean, I love this document, and I would just love for you to talk about how you came to be a Panther, and to even talk about the details of how you became the illustrator of the famous 10-point program for the Black Panther Party for self-defense.
The 10-point platform program I was asked to do by Bobby Seale, the one who threw me under the bus for the coloring book. And I did this after the coloring book. And we have the 10 points. Point number 1, we want the freedom, we want the power to determine the destiny of our black community. Number 2 is we want full employments for our people. Number 3 was we want to end the robbery by the capitalists of our black community. Number 4 was we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. Number 5 was we want an education that teaches us the true nature of this decadent American society. We want an education that gives us knowledge of self. If a man does not have knowledge of himself or his role in history, he has little chance to relate to anything else. Number 5, 6, we want all black men exempt from military service. We will not be forced to fight and kill other people of color who are victimized by this racist government. We want immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people. That's one of the ones that kind of got my attention, and one of the reasons that I was willing to be a part of the Black Panther Party. The one after that is we want all black men released from federal, state, county, city prisons and jails because they have not had a fair and impartial trial. And the last one was we want all black men, when tried in court, to be tried in court by a jury of their peer group as defined by the Constitution. The Constitution says a person has a right to be tried in court by a member of their peer group, PEER, and that's a person from a similar economic, social, geographic, historical, and environmental background. To do this, they would be forced to select a jury from the community from which the person came. That way we felt that we'd be getting fair and impartial trials. The only conviction I ever had in a court was with an all-white jury. That was my only conviction.
And Professor, you memorized this as a younger man, and you're sitting here now telling us word for word.
Well, I didn't even know I could still remember word for word, but we had to internalize that in the Black Panther Party. Matter of fact, I couldn't even read when I got in the Black Panther Party. But in the party, we had political education classes every Monday and Wednesday. And that's where I learned to read, is in the Black Panther Party. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I guess, one of the things I started reading was the 10-point platform and program.
So when you were part of the chapter of the Black Panther Party in Sacramento, you were the lieutenant of culture.
Yes.
And you worked with or reported to Emory Douglas.
Yes.
And I just wanted to mention his name because people may know who Emory Douglas was as the Minister of Culture for the entire Black Panther Party, nationwide or internationally?
Nationwide, yeah. He was the Minister of Culture. And I was one of his lieutenants. I worked under him.
So how did that relationship work? Just thinking about artists working together in this organization in the Bay, did you learn from him? Did you teach him some things? How did that work?
I learned a lot from Emory. He's like a big brother to me. I kind of got the idea of the pig from him, and then I just kind of created my own version of the pig. His is different than mine if you looked at him. But, me and Emory, we still tight today. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to say.
Yeah.
He's a real good friend.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, this is the oldest work, the earliest work that I'm showing for our audience tonight. And I'd love if you could give them some insight. How old were you when you made this work?
When I did this painting, it's called The Atomic Bird. I was in high school. I think I was 16, 17 years old. But what we had studied in elementary school, they had us doing bomb drills. I don't know if any of you have ever had a bomb drill, but if you're my age, we had bomb drills, and they terrified the hell out of us. They had a bomb signal, making all that noise, and we'd have to jump up and get under our desk and duck and cover the back of your head, and get down on the floor under your desk. And we were terrified all the way through elementary school, junior high school, and once I got to junior high school, they started teaching us about reincarnation. And I had never heard anything about when you die, you can come back as something else. And the closest thing they said, the people in India, when they die, they think they come back as cows, so they don't eat cows. So I said, well, damn. When I got to high school, I did my first painting that I did. All this stuff is still in me based on how terrified we were from the bomb drills. And so what I had decided is to do a painting on how I felt, how terrified I was. And what happened is I came back as a bird in an egg, in a nest. And the mother bird was sitting on the egg, and I was all warm and safe. And then somebody dropped this atomic bomb. And when the bomb exploded, it blew up the mother bird, the tree, the nest, and launched the egg into orbit. And after the shell was worn off the egg, I hatched, and I showed the terror that I had from a bomb drill. And I've been blown up twice since then. In Vietnam, I got blown up the first month I was there by a mortar. The second time I was blown up, we was on the road heading for Phu Bai from Chu Lai, and I was walking beside a tank trying to keep the bullets from hitting me. They'd hit the tank and bounce off, and the tank ran over a claymore mine, and that launched me into the rice paddy. And I thought I was dead because I was in the air looking at my body in the rice paddy. And I saw these 4 Marines run over and pick me up and put me on the road and start pumping my chest. And I'm looking down at them pumping my chest, and I'm wondering why they doing that. Can't they see I'm dead? Because I thought I was dead. And this one guy kept pumping. He was a black guy. Everybody else had given up. And I just looked at him, and I said, why is he doing that? And he was just hitting me in the chest so hard. I don't know what happened, but I came out of it, and I came up throwing up and coughing and choking. And the main thing I remember is how my ears were ringing, that ringing in the ears. My ears rang for about 2 to 3 weeks. But that was my experience with being blown up, and I think that, well, at this point in my life, I don't believe in war. I think that any time, if people cannot resolve their contradictions by dialogue or talking about it, we even have interpreters if you can't speak the same language. But I don't think there's anything that can ever happen to humans on this earth where we have to shoot bullets and drop bombs on each other and kill each other, because the people that suffer most in wars are women and children, civilians. That's all I saw in Vietnam, mostly that got killed were the women and the children. So I'm totally against war, and I don't see how any country can get behind anybody who wants to have a war.
I wanted to show Detroit Blue because this resonates with what you're talking about, your experience in Vietnam. If you could say a few things about
Okay.
this.
Well, Detroit Blue was a brother I met in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. He was older. I think he's about 26. I was like 19, 20. And they found out that many of us African Americans could not read, and I was one of them. So they started having these soul sessions every Wednesday night. And what we would do is we'd meet, and we'd all sit around, maybe 30 to 50 of us in the whole battalion. And they would start reading us stuff out of the Stars and Stripes. I remember him reading us about the Geneva Convention. They had banned the use of the 12-gauge shotgun and the 50 caliber machine gun on the Vietnamese people. They said that the 50 caliber machine gun was shooting down helicopters and airplanes, and the Vietnamese don't have no helicopters and airplanes, so that we couldn't use them. And the 12-gauge shotgun with double-aught buckshot tears the human body up so much they called it an overkill weapon. So when he told us about this, he explained to us what the Geneva Convention was. I'd never heard of a Geneva Convention. Matter of fact, the only words I could read was like to and the and it and stuff like that, little words. But they were explaining to us what the words meant. So I didn't even know they had rules for war. I didn't know you had to follow rules when you were at war with someone. And 2 weeks later, the rebellion happened in Detroit, Michigan. And I was sitting in Chulai, Vietnam, and we were at the class, and the Stars and Stripes had come, and the headlines were riots in Detroit, so many blacks die. And Blue was reading the paper to us, and he was from Detroit. And as he read the paper, you could see the tears well up in his eyes. And it may not seem strange to anybody here unless you was a Marine. If you were a Marine, you know that Marines don't cry. I don't care what it is. And when I saw the tears, and we all saw the tears in his eyes, and we said, damn, it shocked us. And he just dropped the paper on the ground and walked off. And we started looking at each other. What's wrong with him, man? The guy crying. So we looking at each other, and we tried to get the paper and tried to figure out the rest of the story. And we heard about the woman that got shot in the face with the .50 caliber machine gun. And then we found out later that she was a woman that he knew. And she had 11 children in her apartment. She ran a daycare in her apartment. And so the next week when he came back, he apologized to us for breaking down like that. And we said, oh, man, we understand. We know we found out that you knew the woman that got killed. He said, no, that ain't got nothing to do with it. Well, he actually said, that ain't got shit to do with it. He said that I broke down because I felt so betrayed by our own government. They use weapons that they can't even use against America's worst enemy on our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers back home, and that's what broke him down. And I said, damn, he felt betrayed by our government. While we over there fighting in Vietnam, they killing our people with weapons they can't even use against America's worst enemy. Mm-hmm. So I can understand that.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Dang, look like I'm breaking down.
Do you want some water?
No, I'm cool.
No, okay. I'm gonna move these along.
Okay, I'm gonna tell this little gator bait story.
Please do.
And I got to tell it because this was a guy when I got back from Vietnam. I met him at Camp Pendleton.
Who did you meet at Camp Pendleton?
This Marine.
Okay.
And everybody called him Gator.
Okay.
And we were sitting down one day at mail calling, and I'd known him for 2 months, and he was Gator. Gator, that's all I knew was Gator. And they said, Wallace, and he got up and got his mail. I said, Wallace? I said, I thought your name was Gator. He said, no, man, that's a nickname. I said, why they nickname you Gator? He said, because when I was a baby, they used me as gator bait. He said that they took him, some guys stole him from his mother. They took him down to the river, him and some more little black babies. They tied a rope around his neck and around his waist. They threw him in the river to catch a bull gator. And when the gator swallowed him, the rope was in the gator's mouth. They pulled the gator out of the water, and one of them hit the gator in the head with a hatchet and killed him. And they had these two black dudes that was with them skin the gator, cut him open and cut the skin off and the meat. I don't know how they do that. But he said when they cut the gator open and they pulled him out, he was still alive. And he went over to the boss and said, boss, this one here is still alive. Want me to chunk him back in and catch another gator? And when the white man looked at him, he said, no. He said, he looked like he could be one of my get. He said, take him back to his mammy. Maybe she can well him up. So I didn't know what a get was. I had to figure all that out. So they took him back to his mother, and she was able to save his life. And he ended up there with me in the Marine Corps. And after he told me the story, I looked at him and said, man, you lying. And he raised up his shirt and showed me all these keloids marks where the teeth prints of the gator had on his skin. And when I saw that, I said, damn, I could believe that. That's, but that's the story.
And this is work that you made recently. The paintings I'm showing now are from 2016, based on that memory.
Yeah, that's based on the memory. I felt that a lot of the things that I remember about my life, I needed to document them with art,
So when did you know that you had to be an artist?
Wow. I guess all my life I've been drawing since I was 4. And it wasn't anything. I guess when I was 3, I had polio. So polio paralyzed the whole left side of my body and my face included. And I think that should have disqualified me from being in the Marine Corps. But I guess at the time they was scraping the bottom of the barrel and I was the bottom. So I was taken.
And then you were an artist in school, but then an artist when you were in the Marine
When I got
Corps.
in the Marine Corps, they saw that I could draw. And when I got to Vietnam, they changed my MOS. They gave me a 1461, which is a combat illustrator. So I was a combat illustrator in Vietnam, go out in the field and fight. When I got back to the compound, I'd go to headquarters company and I had a desk and I would draw things that I had seen.
And this is a story that there's a pattern for African American artists. I think about Jacob Lawrence being an illustrator.
Horace Pippin.
Horace Pippin.
And they were also veterans,
That's
military
right.
veterans.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's some more work from 2016.
This is Amadou Diallo. And Amadou Diallo is African. Well, he was actually an African from Guinea. And the police shot him 41 times, reaching for his wallet. They asked him for his ID. He was standing on his porch. He went to get his wallet out of his pocket, and they shot him 41 times.
And this was in New York.
That was in New York. And, I don't see how you can shoot somebody 41 times, man. One bullet is enough.
Right.
You
But you're using that same style and the symbolism from the 60s and 70s.
I did.
And helping us see what's going on in more recent time.
And kind of so people can kind of understand the reason we call the police pigs. Because of the way they demonstrated in the African community. We didn't see them like a lot of other people see them helping little old ladies across the street and smiling and all that. No, the way we saw them was like a vicious, occupying force that occupied our neighborhood, and we had to be very careful because we knew that they could kill us any day of the week, and it would be justifiable homicide because that's what it always is.
Okay, I'm going to transition now from your paintings to the sculpture. And we looked at some of the sculpture already that's in the show, but you have a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of sculptures.
I would say probably thousands. But the thing about it is, when I do a piece like this, I have studied African art and the history of African art. Matter of fact, I taught that for 26 years at Cal State Long Beach. And one of the things I learned about African art, and they used to critique the work, and the Africans, they make the heads too big. Well, there's a reason for that. And it's not that they make the heads too big. It's that when I went to Africa, the several times that I've been, about 14 times, every time I go to do research. And I try to get information on African art, African sculpture. And I question people about why the heads are so large. And they say, well, the most important thing about a human is his brain, his intelligence, his intellect. That's why a man can overpower an elephant, a camel, or a horse, and he can ride them. And even though the horse or the elephant or the camel is bigger than the man has the brain power to be able to control that animal. And control him because he's a man. He says that the head houses the brain. It also houses the spirit or the ori of a person. So that's why the heads are made larger. And I try to demonstrate that in the work that I do.
Would you talk to us about the kinds of skills that you learned from African artists and where in Africa? You've been to Burkina Faso. I've
been to Burkina Faso. It's too many countries to name.
Okay.
I've been to about 30 countries in Africa.
Okay.
And usually I work with the artists wherever I am. I've cast bronze with the bronze casters. And in traveling in Africa, I get a feeling whenever I get by a bronze casting place that I've been here before. that I've done this before. That it's deja vu. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like I was a bronze caster in another life in Africa. And when I saw the plaques that the British stole in 1897 out of Benin, all the artwork, all the sculpture, everything they stole. And when I heard that they refused to return it to Nigeria, I decided that I have to do some plaques of my own and have them cast in bronze. If they won't return them, then I will do plaques. But the plaques that I'm doing are not going to be like the ones we did in Africa, because all they talked about was the Oba, the king of Benin, his wife, the queen mother, and their children and their attendants. Well, I said to myself, most of the kings and queens and things of that nature I don't relate to. I'm more of a proletariat kind of person, or a lumpen proletariat. And the pieces that I'm going to do are going to be the people that were taken as slaves and those who led slave revolts to try to end slavery, those who fought against slavery, those who were involved in the lynchings and the massacres and the different atrocities that happened to our people. I want people to know about that kind of thing. Okay, this piece is they had when they had a slave revolt, they would have the person who was leading the slave revolt have a drum, a small drum they call the tama drum. It's a talking drum. And when they played this drum, it would call all the slaves out of the fields to the roads. And this particular one was the Charles Deslandes march to New Orleans, Louisiana. This is the one that happened in 1811 in German Coast, Louisiana. And Charles Deslandes was the one who led that revolt. He was a child in Haiti when they had the revolt that was led by Boukman Dutty and taken over by Toussaint after Dutty was captured and beheaded.
So I have some images in here also of
Plaques.
the plaques that are here. So they're not in bronze, but eventually you'd like them
No,
to be in
yeah, that's
bronze.
what, bronze costs a lot to do.
Okay.
Clay is cheap,
Okay.
so I can get clay.
Would you talk to us a bit about your techniques here? Because, even the glazes, I'm wondering, is your process also influenced by your work with Africans, or is there Japanese influence? Is this a global
Well, the
kind of-
raku process is a Japanese technique. They do raku glazing, and they used to do these for tea ceremonies, but they could only use the teacups one time because raku, there's cracks that get into the glaze, and if you're drinking tea out of it, bacteria will get into the cracks. You can't clean it out, and you get sick. So I like the raku process, and I do the same thing in the glazing techniques. I like the kind of metallic lusters that you get when you do raku. I think it's incredible, and you can never tell how it's going to come out. And I think that's amazing. Every time you take it out of the can, it's like Christmas, and you open up a present.
Yeah, that experimentation. Is that something that you find in common with other ceramicists that you've worked with, or?
I haven't really worked with too many ceramicists that do raku.
Okay.
I learned that when I was in school from Professor Al Bird back at City College in Sacramento.
Okay.
That's where I first did raku, and I thought it was amazing, and I've incorporated it now into almost everything I do. I want to make big pieces, and I need to get a bigger kiln that
Okay.
I don't have to lift them out of the fire when they're red hot, because I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I saw a kiln in Mexico that I'm going to try to see if I can get one made for myself so I can produce these big pieces and pull them out and don't have to lift them up.
Do you have assistants that you work with?
I do. I have a couple of my assistants are here
Great.
that do the raku. They pull the stuff out of the fire now, lately, because I'm not like I was a few years back.
Okay. I'm showing some more work from the gallery.
Yeah, this
And
is
please go ahead.
this is a piece called "The Birth of the Vanguard," and the Black Panther Party was called the Vanguard Party. That's what we used to call the Vanguard Party, and it was born in 1966 while I was in Vietnam. That's when the Vanguard Party was born, and I tried to show the panthers on the side of it, and the head of a panther coming out of a womb, and then a womb. There was a lid to this piece that's not in the show, but the lid has three women on the top of the lid, and their heads are connected, and that's showing the ideological oneness of the Black Panther Party, that we had to study the 10-point platform and program and internalize it. And everything else that we studied, we developed an ideology as Panthers, and we had to make a commitment to serve the people. That's who we were committed to, serving humanity and mankind. That's what the Black Panther Party was all about. If you look at our 10-point platform and program, we're primarily focused on things that will happen to Africans in the African community, but we also were committed to humanity or mankind. And I think that what the FBI did and COINTELPRO to vilify the Black Panther Party, I think that was horrible. But they do that to vilify anybody that's struggling for something that's just.
Let's look at some more work from upstairs. Yeah, so here's two more sides of the work that you were just talking about.
Yeah, that's the baby's head coming out of a womb on the left. I guess
Okay,
that's
let me help everybody over here.
okay.
So this is three different views of the same sculpture, Strange Fruit, Frontline Crusaders.
Okay, Strange Fruit dealt with lynchings, and it has there were so many lynchings that took place in this country, and they lynched and burned, and I mean, you read the history of it, how they would roast somebody over a fire slowly until they died, cut off body parts and all that kind of thing. And then they had people like Ida B. Wells, who was in the forefront of the anti-lynching movement. And like I said before, there were women that were in the forefront of the movement. That's why I have a woman on the top of this piece.
Okay. Thank you.
This was Charles Deslams in the 1811 German Coast Slave Revolt in German Coast, Louisiana. They went from plantation to plantation down the road, and they would have a drummer calling all the slaves out of the fields to join in the march to New Orleans.
And this is an example of the plaques that we were just
Yeah,
talking
this is an
about.
example of the plaques. And this one here is Big Jim and Big Nana. And I don't know if you heard, but they used to breed Africans, and they would take a tall African man and a tall African woman and breed them, and they would make children. And this is two of their children being taken to the pickaninny wagon. Now, they had what they call a pickaninny farm, where they would take children from Africans and put them on the farm and raise them on a pickaninny farm. Now, the woman, Big Nana, is pregnant, and Big Jim is holding her in his arms. They chained them both up before they came to get their children, because a lot of times people don't want you to take their children. They'll try to fight you. And rather than fight Big Jim and Big Nana, they chained them up first. Then they took the children to the pickaninny wagon. And after the wagon was long down the road and it started getting dark, they let Big Jim and Big Nana loose. Well, Big Jim took off running down the road till he caught up with the pickaninny wagon. And he found them guys asleep, and he broke their necks and let all the children free.
Professor, could you talk to us about composition? I mean, the way that you're describing things, clearly this is like a storytelling device. You can look at this and you can tell us how time is passing, the order of events, sequences as if it's multiple frames. But how do you decide to come up with your composition to tell stories?
You know, it's not something that I decide like that.
Okay.
I listened to the stories that my father told me when I met him. All the stories that he told me about our people in Louisiana to Mississippi, and why they left Louisiana and went to Mississippi. And that was all because of the 1811 slave revolt, where my great-great-great-grandfather was beheaded. And one of his sons was also beheaded. but 3 of his sons escaped out of Louisiana into Mississippi. And 2 of the brothers went to South Carolina, I believe, and my father's people stayed in Mississippi. But sometimes I'm sitting down with the clay and my spirit is telling me what to make. It's not like I sit down and think of the composition.
Okay.
I remember all the things that I've heard, everything that I've learned, and I just let the spirit guide me to what I do.
Okay.
Does that answer it?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right.
Now you mentioned Bookman Duddy already, but this is the image that goes with the story.
Yeah, Bookman Duddy was the one who led the first slave revolt. Not the first one, but the one right before Toussaint. And he was beheaded. And when the French took him and they had him on the chopping block and he was getting ready to chop his head off, he said, "You can kill me, but my spirit is coming back as a mosquito." So after they beheaded him, and you see I got a big mosquito coming out the side of his neck,
Okay.
the mosquitoes, 38,000 of Napoleon's men died from yellow fever from the mosquito. So he came back as a mosquito, all right.
And on the sides, are these fish that you have?
Those are fish, they're mudfish.
Okay.
And one of the things I learned in Africa is that I was in Bobo and I was standing on the bridge and you could look down in this little stream and see all these catfish swimming. And I asked him, I said, "Well, how come nobody ever fishes and catch those fish?" "Oh, no, you can't eat those fish. Those fish are sacred." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "When somebody dies, they'll take a fish and bury the fish with the person so that the spirit of the fish can guide the person's spirit to the proper heaven." So that's why we don't eat the fish. They're sacred. So in a lot of the pieces that I do, you'll see mudfish. And like they look like they're going up to heaven or whatever, but that's guiding the spirit of the deceased to the proper heaven. Because in Africa, they don't believe in heaven and hell like we do. They don't have a hell. They have 2 heavens. And depending on whether you're good or bad, depends on which heaven you get into. If you go to the good heaven, everything's going to be all right. But if you've been bad on earth, you go to the bad heaven. And nobody wants to go to the bad heaven. Because if you go to the good heaven, you come back through your offspring or your bloodline or your descendants. One of them will be your spirit. But if you go to the bad heaven, you might come back as a cockroach and somebody stomp on you. Or something worse, some other kind of lesser animal. You won't come back as a human. So that's why everybody wants to go to the good heaven. You want the mudfish to lead you to the proper heaven.
Okay.
This is Didan Kamati Wachuru and Bayomungi, his lieutenant. And this is in Kenya when the Mau Mau fought against the British. Now, I know how the British vilified the Mau Mau, and they executed Didan Kamati when he was in prison. They arrested him when they captured him. They executed him with the permission of Jomo Kenyatta, who was the first president of Kenya. Now, everybody tries to say Jomo Kenyatta was in the Mau Mau. He wasn't. I believed that before I went to Kenya and got with the brothers in Kenya, and they took me around to Mau Mau, and I talked to Mau Mau that was still alive. And they were telling me about Didan Kamati and how he was a teacher, and he organized the Mau Mau to fight against the British. And Bayomungi, who was his lieutenant, used to fight for the British in Burma. He was fought on the side of the British in Burma, and when he got out, he joined up with the Mau Mau, and he learned how to make weapons when he was fighting for the British, and he started showing the Mau Mau how to make weapons, make a shotgun out of bicycle handlebars and stuff like that. And they have a lot of the weapons in the museum in Kenya. If you go to Nairobi, they used to have some of the Mau Mau's weapons there.
Okay.
And one of the things that I did in this piece is they took me to Limeru, and they say this is where Didan Kamati used to hide out. And I noticed it was so peaceful and so quiet, but one of the things I noticed was all the butterflies. And I was looking at these butterflies, and I said, doggone, this is amazing. So when I made the piece, I put all these butterflies in it. I mean, it's just amazing.
Oops, let me go back one.
This is the Elaine, Arkansas massacre in 1919. This was right after World War I. There were close to over 100,000 African Americans who fought in Europe in World War I. And they were highly decorated by the French. The French gave them the highest honors they could. When they get back to the U.S., they tried to farm, and this is in Elaine, Arkansas, where they were farming cotton, and they organized a group of Africans to sell their cotton collectively so they could get a better price. And the other farmers, they didn't like that, so they tried to break it up, and they disrupted a meeting they were having, and one of the white men got killed. So the rest of the white men got together, and they organized, and they started setting the Africans' houses on fire. When they run out, they'd shoot them and kill them. And so most of them ran into the forest to hide from the Klan and everybody else who was killing them. They were hiding in the forest. And since they were all veterans, when they saw the army pull up and start getting out their machine guns and setting up everything, they ran out of the forest with their hands up because they figured the army didn't came to save us. So when they ran out, the army started shooting them down with these machine guns. And I've read documents where they say it was 237 men, women, and children, but I've read other documents that say it was as high as 852. So they don't talk about that because it was the U.S. Army that was involved in this atrocity. And some of those guys had Purple Hearts, like mine. I got 3 of them.
That's right.
And, you know, I don't know. It's just hard.
Can you, I guess I would like to hear you just say more about how important this is for you, you know, because you've got African history, you've got African American history, you're bringing it all together. And just about your passion for this, why this is important, how it's incredible that it's here at the Hammer. You know, you're reaching new audiences with your work now.
You know, I have to agree with you. I was surprised. Because I'm going to tell you, man, I've been doing work for a long time, but nobody would touch anything. Galleries wouldn't want to exhibit it. And it was like the Hammer selected it. I said, oh, man, Hammer what? I was shocked. But I'm glad, you know, because I like to reach students. I think it's important to reach the student segment of society because you students are the ones who are going to change the world, not us. You're going to change the world, and I think that you have to get this information. I think it's important that you get it. So I'm proud to have this exhibit at the Hammer Museum.
That's awesome. I know we're going to start moving towards time for audience questions for you.
Okay.
So there's one in particular. I think I left it to the end.
That one.
Do you want to? This wasn't it, but do you want to talk about this one?
Well, this is the Moores Ford Bridge lynching, and I'll definitely talk about it. It was 2 couples. This is the last mass lynching in this country. This happened in 1946, the year I was born. That's why it touches me, because my mother was pregnant with me in 1946. And the 2 women were pregnant. One was 8 months pregnant. The other one was 3 months pregnant. They tied them to a tree. The reason they arrested Roger Malcolm is because they were working on a farm sharecropping, and his wife was being molested by the guy who owned the farm's son. And he confronted him. She told her husband, and he confronted the guy, and they got in a fight. And he ended up cutting the guy who was molesting his wife. And they arrested him, naturally. And he was in jail, but back then, a black person couldn't bail another black person out of jail, even if he had the money. You had to get a white person and give him the money to bail him out. So they went, the only white person they knew was the owner of the farm. They gave him the $500 to bail Malcolm out of jail. He went and bailed Malcolm out of jail. When Malcolm came out and they all was in the car, instead of going back to the farm, he turned around and went towards Moores Ford Bridge. At the bridge, the Klan was waiting. And the Klan they wanted Roger. So they got Roger out, and one of the women recognized one of the Klansmen. And she said, Mr. So-and-so, and somebody said, oh, they recognize us now. We got to kill all of them. So they tied them all to a tree. The one that was 8 months pregnant, they cut her belly open, let the baby drop out on the ground. And they cut Malcolm's penis off and stuck it in his mouth. And, this is the kind of things that happen. It happened a lot, really. So I had to put that in some, I didn't think anybody would ever see it, but I have to get it off of my chest.
Mm-hmm. I think this is the last one. This is the one I wanted you to
Okay, this is
speak about.
Queen Nani of Jamaica. Queen Nani, she had soldiers in Jamaica, and they fought against the British also. And when the British would be coming, they had the little horn around her neck is called a cabine. And she would blow that horn, and it would tell them all of her soldiers would get in the bushes, and they would hide from the British, and they would wrap up in leaves and vines, and they would look just like the trees. So they would hide there, and they would stand there until the British soldiers got there. They marched down there, coming with their big old boots on and big red jackets. And as they marched through, all of a sudden, the warriors dressed in all this bushes and stuff, camouflage, they'd jump out on the British and they'd kill all of them but one. They'd leave one of them alive and let him go back and tell them what happened. He'd go back and he'd say, the forest attacked us. He thought the forest actually attacked them and killed all their men. And so they were able to defeat the British because I guess the British were like, we ain't going over there, not with the bushes is attacking. But that was Queen Nani. I thought it was a good story. She invented camouflage, and don't nobody give her credit for it, but she's the one who started camouflage.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
So this was our last image. If we could just, everyone collectively thank Professor Kambon for his work.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the strength to tell these stories. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot, but these stories will be telling them long after I'm gone, and that's what I want.
So we have some people from the Hammer who can bring microphones to anyone that has a question. Yeah, we have some in the front. Thank you. Just if you would just hang on till the mic comes.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having this panel or series of talks, especially from someone such as yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm a student in landscape architecture, and I couldn't help but notice there were a lot of themes of nature and mysticism. And recently there was I read a text by Randall Bird, and I think another artist, Okinaye, and just from what I was reading, there was a lot of similar elements of the use of Nsi objects or Owu objects that were placed on the perimeter of forests and were used as indicators of taboo and ways to kind of keep people out. And I was just wondering if in your time in Africa, did you see or hear any kind of those types of religious or traditions that inspired your work?
I think that most of my work, I really had no idea of what I was doing until in 1994. I don't know what year it was. But me and my wife went to Elmina Castle in Ghana and went down in the slave dungeon. And I got into it with a guy, and they made me go out. It was a tour, and my wife said she put me out. I went out, and I stood outside and waited until the tour was over. And after the tour was over, she came up to him. We were talking, and the docent came over, and he said, "I understand what you're going through." He said, "If you want to go back in there with your wife, you and your wife can go back in there by yourself." So we did. I went into this one room where they said they had over 500 slaves in this one dungeon. And I got on my knees, and my wife had went somewhere else because she had seen the whole tour, but I hadn't seen these rooms. And I started to meditate or pray or whatever you want to call it. And all of a sudden, I heard this female voice say, "We've been waiting for you." And it scared me. I never had anything like this happen to me. She said, "We need you to teach our children who were stolen about our history, about our culture, and about our religions." And I was like, I didn't know what to do because I'd never had an experience like this. And I started thinking to myself, I didn't say nothing. I started thinking, but I don't know anything about African religions and all this stuff. I didn't know anything about that. And she could hear what I was thinking. And she said, "Don't worry, we have been guiding your hands." Because I had been doing this artwork ever since the 1970s, the sculpture. And when she said, "We have been guiding your hands," then everything, it started to click for me, you know? And I mean, it was such a event. I was kind of scared to tell anybody about it for years because I thought, since I was going through this whole PTSD thing and I started talking to spirits and things like that, they might lock me up at the VA hospital. And I wasn't trying to do that. So I kept quiet on it for some years until I finally was telling somebody about it, and my wife overheard it. And then I said, "Oh," so I was busted. Okay. But it's like a spiritual thing, really. And I don't really ever really know. I just start going back into everything that I've lived and experienced, and all of a sudden, I'll start working and it'll become something. And they have a power to them too. And I don't know how to explain that, but they do have a power. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you still have the mic? Can you pass it to the person behind you, or who has it? Here you go. Thank you. Okay, someone in the middle has a question.
Good evening, and thank you, Doctor. I am an art historian and art collector from Loyola Marymount University. I am Nigerian American, and my name is Sinde Tantwa. I have two questions. I wanted to know, well, first question, would you say images like these prove themselves to be of relevance in today's society and do you think that they may incite anger in others? Because there are four races, and this is a perpetuated idea that is brought upon, and it may incite anger in the younger community. And my second question is, do you believe images like these allow the Black American community to continue to be pacified in the United States? Thank you.
Well, I would say that the images will spark, hopefully, conversation. And I think that being a revolutionary artist, the one thing you understand about a revolutionary artist is that we have to be truthful with a capital T. And we have to speak of what's just and justice with a capital J. And if somebody's feelings get hurt because of something that happened 100 years ago, I can't help that. But that's just the way it is. But I think we need to learn to be honest with our children. I know nobody was honest with me. When I grew up, I didn't know anything about slavery. They kept all that away from me. Had I learned about it as a child, I would not have been so struck as I became a man and started finding out these things that I should have learned when I was a kid. Now, I had an experience when Roots came out. That was Kunta Kinte and all that. And we were watching Roots, and it was on every night. And I got up, and I was living in Fresno at the time. And I went to the liquor store. And as I was coming out of the store, I saw a yellow cab across the street with the lights on, doors open, and I saw a group of African American teenagers beating the hell out of this white man. So I ran over there and I pulled him off of him and asked them, what were they doing? I said, what are you doing? They said, didn't you see Roots? I said, yeah, I saw Roots. They said, what's that got to do with this man? They said, he's white. I said, boy, get off that man. And I pushed him off of him. And I said, look, but when I saw that was in the 70s. I thought to myself, I said, these young men were so shocked by seeing Roots. And I said to myself, I said, well, I guess if you've never heard any of that history and you're a young teenager and you see this, you're going to get angry at somebody white and you're going to react physically and violently towards a white person that don't have a damn thing to do with what happened 100 years ago. You understand? And I think that we have to deal with this. And what we've been doing all these years is pushing it under the carpet and hiding it. And I think that our history got some bad things in it. This country did some bad stuff. We didn't assassinated Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral. You can name all the African leaders who were fighting for independence of Africa and see what the United States did. United States, when the Portuguese had colonized Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau, and when they were fighting against the Portuguese, the United States supported Portugal. When Ian Smith in Rhodesia was fighting against the freedom fighters ZANU and ZAPU in Rhodesia, the United States supported Ian Smith. Same thing with apartheid in South Africa. The United States supported apartheid government. Do you understand what I'm saying? You cannot kick this under the rug. When people start looking at history, you have to understand it truthfully. You have to look at it scientifically and you have to analyze it. And you have to make a choice on what you are going to do. Me, myself, coming from an oppressed segment of society and understand the history, I feel like if I don't use any skills I have as an artist to convey this history to our youth and teach them, then I betray everything that our ancestors died for. And that's all of them, including John Brown, who was white, who fought against slavery and was lynched or was hung. Mm-hmm. John Brown. Now, see, I had people come tell me, well, it makes white kids feel bad. I said, well, shit, why don't y'all tell them some stories about the white heroes? William Lloyd Garrison or John Brown. You got white people that did the right thing back then. Even though they were going up against a lot of odds, they did the right thing. And you have to present this to the children. You have to figure out how to do it. If you need some white heroes, look them up. All you got to do is research. You'll find many white folks fought against slavery. There are a whole lot of white boys that fought in the Union Army against the Confederacy. And you gotta understand that. You gotta be truthful about it. It's not about that. It's about justice and it's about the truth. You gotta look at these things and you gotta understand it like that.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here to see if we have maybe one more question.
Okay.
We have a couple of hands down here in the front.
I can just make a comment that I'd like to share with the audience. If they haven't seen the Hammer video of you, the video that Hammer made of you, they need to see it. It's very, very good. Hammer did a wonderful job with this. I'm very proud of you, but also proud of the Hammer.
Thank you. I am too.
Yeah.
I think that was wonderful.
I'm just going to repeat this. Without the mic, not everybody can hear. So the comment from the audience here is that the Hammer made almost 10-minute film about your ideas and your art making practice, and that it's really powerful and well done. And so this man is just suggesting that everyone see it. You can find it on the Hammer's website. Okay, and then right here with the microphone.
Hi. I just want to thank you for being here tonight. I think one of my biggest questions is, throughout everything that you've seen and all the events that you've lived through, how do you still continue to have like hope for humanity and just like the
Well,
future?
that's a wonderful question, and I think it's because of you, because of all you young people that I know is going to change the world. That's why I do it. I have confidence in you. I have confidence, I have faith in you, and I'll never give up the faith in the youth because you're coming to take our places, and the world is pretty messed up right now, and you got a responsibility to change it. You got to change it. I'm 76 years old, man. I ain't going to be around long, but I'm going to do what I can to help you. And this is my way of helping young people to do whatever it is they have to do to change the world.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I think we're honored to have refreshments. If we walk out of the auditorium, there's cookies, sugar, and caffeine, that kind of thing. So we'll see you up there. Thanks everybody for coming.